So what is consciousness? At this stage I've been talking about the innate wisdom of the body as being a part of consciousness. In earlier lectures I talked about the difference in the types of science. There's a scientific approach and there's pure science. And to me, one of the most important considerations for healthcare in the future is that I believe that the healthcare of the future must be scientifically based. And that is why Bodytalk has to be one of the major systems of healthcare. And one might look at this and say, well, isn't medicine, traditional medicine, scientifically based? And I will say, no, not really. It's primarily a lot of traditions, it's a lot of folklore, and a lot of superstition. Now, it does, however, use a Cartesian model that has a scientific approach to it. It uses scientific techniques of analysis. It uses research techniques that are scientific in their approach, that are Cartesian, and they look at things very closely, and they try things out and do experiments and come up with what they think is a good system or a good model, and they use that model for a while until they find it doesn't work well enough, and then they try and improve on it. Yes, there's a science to that. That is a basic, standard physics, Cartesian approach of science. So that's not what I'm talking about, because you see, the body doesn't work that way. It works partly Cartesian, but if you really look at the big picture, we have to look at pure science. We have to look at the big type science, and that is quantum physics. You see, quantum physics started out 100 years ago as a study of the microscopic world, the world within the atom, the subatomic world, the quarks, and all that type of thing. And of course, they found it worked very, very differently to the Cartesian model, the physical world, the Newtonian world, the Einsteinian world of even relativity. But quantum mechanics, everything was different. All the laws were different. Suddenly, instead of matter couldn't be created or destroyed, it just goes from one thing to the other. They found energy and matter are created and destroyed all the time. And everything is connected, all sorts of things. And in fact, things only exist when you look at them. It was a weird and wild and woolly world at first, but it's developed a great deal. They've learned a great deal. And what they've now found, of course, and especially in the last 20 or 30 years, is that all the principles and theories of the quantum world apply in the real world as we see it, in the tangible world, right up to the universal level. And in fact, the mathematics of quantum physics can now be applied and are applied in advanced engineering and advanced science. And in fact, most of the major discoveries of recent times that give you your iPhones and your LED TVs and all the new technology, the fiber optic cables, and all the things we rely on, the whole digital world, etc., is all based on quantum mechanics. It's not based on Newtonian physics. And this is something people don't realize. But, and it's been an interesting factor that, quantum mechanics has actually taken over. Except that quantum mechanics and theoretical quantum physics are almost now two sections. You can actually go to universities now in America and where you'll learn quantum mechanics as far as the mathematics, but in the textbook you start on chapter 6, because chapters 1 to 5 contain quantum theory. And most of the professors in the universities don't want their students going there because that's wild stuff. It's weird stuff. It's like advanced philosophy. And, that's not a good word when you're talking about physics, but it is. And it says a lot of things. It challenges, in fact, the mechanics or the techniques they're learning. So they just start them out with the mathematics. That's why I've met quantum physicists and I talk about all the problems of the collapsing of the wave and the paradox and things like that. And I say, what's that about? We never learnt that at college. And that's the world of theoretical quantum physics. And that's the real world because that describes how things really are. In other words, the intermeshing of everything, the way things actually work. And of course, one of the key elements of that world is the understanding of the nature of manifestation. There are two concepts of manifestation, what we call top-down or bottom-up. Classical physics likes the bottom-up because the bottom-up is based on that there's particles of matter. Everything comes from little particles. And these little particles all get together, and when you get enough of them together, they take on different shapes and different chemical compounds. And when you get all that together, and you get a whole lot of them together, you'll suddenly get life. Right? Now, that's the theory. And that life will give rise to sentience and consciousness and understanding. Now, that sounds like I'm talking a fairy tale here, because it doesn't make sense. And of course, mathematically, in quantum mechanics and in quantum theory and in mathematical theory, that concept is impossible. Because for that to occur, for enough compounds to come together to actually form life, the variables that have to occur, and to do that over and over again, which would have to do trillions of times, they worked out mathematically the chance of that occurring mathematically can virtually not be computed because it's almost an infinite number. And Dr. Fred Hoyle, a famous quantum physicist and mathematician, pointed out that the concept, the biological concept of life coming accidentally, of things coming together by accident, the chances of that happening we can equate to a dumping ground for old planes and a tornado coming through. And after the tornado has gone through, lo and behold, there's a fully constructed, brand new 747 jet fitted, ready to fly. Now, the chances of that happening are much higher and much more probable than the chances of a cell forming, okay, from a mathematical point of view. That's how absurd it is. And this is verified by all the great mathematicians and physicists, but biologists still like that concept because they're not physicists and they're not mathematicians. They're dreamers, right? And the reality is you can't get consciousness out of a dead brain or body. And when a body dies, all the ingredients are there. Just because all the ingredients are there doesn't mean it comes together. Dr. Kaku, a very famous physicist, he's the physicist behind M theory, string theory, all those types of things from New York University. I was talking to him one time, and we actually did a lecture I was at, and he talked about the same thing, the absurdity of all this. And he said, you know, under that situation, let's do an experiment. Let's get a frog, put it in a blender, blend it, then pour the contents into a beaker, and let's sit and watch the frog form. Because under the biological process, everything needed for a frog is in that blender. So it should form. And do you want to know the chances of that occurring? Infinite. Impossible. Okay, it doesn't work that way. What happens is they've shown that's what we call the bottom-up concept, when in fact the top-down concept is consciousness is the base matter of all being. This is the work of Dr. Goswami and many other top quantum physicists. Consciousness is the base matter. This consciousness has a certain basic innate intelligence, and that consciousness has to direct everything. And in fact, is the base of everything, because when we're looking at the structure of the body or the structure of the world, particles, one other big problem with the bottom-up theory is the particles themselves, because they've never found them. No matter how small they've gone, that's not the smallest. And they keep going smaller and smaller and smaller. They've put a new reactor over in Switzerland that they reckon they're going to find the smallest particles, but most of the physicists in the world say that's just a big prank going on, a big way of spending a lot of money and employing a lot of people, because the mathematicians will point out the smallest particle mathematically has to be infinitely small, therefore doesn't exist. There is no actual substance or building blocks to the universe. Even in string theory, the smallest particle, the string, is in fact a musical note. It is not a substance. Right, in string theory, and a musical note with sentience, right, in intellect. Okay. Now, the consciousness, in other words, is there. Now, another characteristic, of course, is that consciousness is evolving. It's not static. It's not like some very smart person decided I'll build the world because he's taken a long time to do it. It's an evolution. So that's why in biology we see the evolutionary process. Sure, there's been an evolutionary process, and because the consciousness is an evolving thing. It's an evolving evolutionary process which is accelerating at the moment quite rapidly. And it has evolved to the point that its ability to communicate with us, other than through other mystical means and everything, but in practical ways, in systems like Bodytalk, is now there. And we can utilize this, and that's what we're doing. We're utilizing it at a smaller level through a representation of consciousness in the human individual, and that is called the innate wisdom.